Welcome to the TH Fantasy Football Show, hosted by Pestell and Ed.
And welcome to TH Fantasy Football Show with your favourite fantasy football duo, Pestell and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. If we say fantasy football any more times, have we made it clear we are fantasy football focused, Ed?
No, we are definitely fantasy football focused, Mark.
I'm very excited because this is where our shows start to, kick off and ramp up for the off-season, because we're starting our rookie preview shows. I think we're very, very clear. We are not experts when it comes to college football. We are not experts when it comes to rookies. We have done a lot of research in the build-up to this, using loads of other great sources that we like to go to. And we'll talk about those at the end of the show as well to point you in the right direction. But we feel we've got about squaring our heads going into the draft. Players we're interested in, players we're not so keen on, and players who are absolutely landing spot dependent.
I was about to say, that is a phrase you will hear time and time again, landing spot dependent.
Welcome to landing spot dependent season.
That could be the name of a podcast.
It could be,
landing spot dependent, yeah.
So we're going to start looking through those rookies then over the next 4 shows. We've got a show at each of the key positions for fantasy football, and then we'll be joined by Rich at Dynasty Island on X to talk to us about some sleepers as well, because, we found out when we did the mock draft show the other day, we knew it anyway, but he just confirmed he's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to the rookies, and someone that we very much like to learn from, don't we?
Yeah, and he also found time to do a half marathon at the weekend.
Yep.
His energy knows no bounds.
We're going to start off with wide receivers for our first show. So not the crop that we've seen over the last couple of years, but always a number of players to talk about. For each of these shows, we can give you the rundown of our top 5 picks at that position, and then maybe a few other players just to have on the radar, because once again, depending on their landing spot, they could become far more relevant than we're expecting. And obviously, when we think back to 2 years ago, we did not utter the name Puka Nacua but once in our rookie shows, and look what happened there. So also be prepared for us to miss out the absolute stellar rookie wide receiver in this show. Realistically, I think this is a class that is full of dynasty long-term, wide receiver 2, flex players of the future, with maybe a couple that have wide receiver 1 upside.
We're going to talk about the weird person in the collection. Maybe that's the wrong word.
I'm not quite sure that's the kindest way to put it.
The joker in the pack. But outside of the joker in the pack, there's one other wide receiver who I think has elite upside. But we'll come on to that shortly.
Well, I think we just get straight into the joker. The joker is Mr. Travis Hunter, wide receiver / cornerback, coming out of Colorado. Wide receiver rank, I've just got question marks. We do not know if, and it is a big if, he were to come in purely as a wide receiver. For me, there is no question he is wide receiver 1 in this draft. He has wide receiver 1 upside. He's the Heisman Trophy winner for a reason. But he's an absolute wild card because we don't know what position he will be playing. And he is arguably the best wide receiver in the draft. He's also arguably the best corner in the whole draft. For fantasy, we need that clarity. So he is potentially going to have a career that is absolutely stellar on both sides of the ball and not be hugely reliable for fantasy football.
I can't see any situation where he does both. Can you? In NFL, I think he will have to choose. I don't think in modern NFL you can play like most of the snaps on defense and offense, can you?
I'm not sure it's the best comparison, but I wonder if he will be Taysom Hill-esque in the fact that he will probably be predominantly a defensive player, but then comes out and does the odd play that's drawn up for him at wide receiver, the same as Taysom Hill played that tight end out the backfield role as a running back, bit of a hybrid, but then there was the odd play drawn up for him for a quarterback play as well.
I just think that you're diluting his talent potentially. Yeah. And I think for him to be a superstar, I think they have to select one, and he will be an elite wide receiver or an elite cornerback.
Maybe he can just play every snap all season.
Yeah, that is surely not
Surely that's
well.
Sustainable for 2 years?
Yeah.
Is a phenomenal athlete. If anyone could do it, it would be him. But I agree. I don't think it's possible. He's got excellent play IQ on both sides of the ball. Great athleticism. His change of direction is just ridiculous. I think I've said this a few times of Zay Flowers, that is like a computer game where he just goes the direction at the same speed. Travis Hunter does that to the nth degree. Only worry, a little bit lighter But we've said this of a lot of players well at this stage, that gets addressed. You get into an NFL team and they sort out your body size, they sort out what they need you to do. So I don't think that'll be a worry. If he splits defensive and offensive snaps, he will be boom or bust on any given week for fantasy, but you will never, ever know what week to play him, I don't think.
Right, from a fantasy point of view, it would be so frustrating if he does that.
Landing spots, anyone in the top 5. He will be gone by the time we've got through the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Patriots, or the Jags, unless someone trades up to get him.
Are you entirely convinced by that? Is there a world where he kind of drops because people are unsure about him?
No.
And they no,
I don't think at all. I
just thought I'd raise that as a question.
I think if we get down to Giants, Patriots, and they don't want him, someone else will take that pick from them. I think we could see a trade there. So fantasy outlook, who knows? Hopefully we know as soon as he's drafted. What I don't want is someone to draft him, and then they're all cryptic about what they're going to do.
Oh, that's going to happen, isn't it?
Pure wide receiver, you'd hope for wide receiver one upside, potentially week in, week out, plug and play as your number one wide receiver on your team. I just don't think that's going to happen. Certainty is there, though, when we look at the number one player on my list, the number one player on most people's list. I think that is Ted McMillan, current out of Arizona. Draft prediction, I've seen a few, kind of lots of ranges, really, when we looked at this, when you're looking at existing mock drafts. I think he was very low in the latest Daniel Jeremiah one. I think realistically, somewhere between pick 10 and 20.
I'm going on the highest. I think he'll go like 10, 11.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if he dropped any lower than that. For me, if you take out Travis Hunter, he's separated from the rest of the wide receivers, Ted McMillan. I think he's, there's the great quote that I read. I don't really know what it means, but I like it. Described as a smooth criminal of a receiver. I don't really know what that means.
That's just a quote. Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
I like it. A smooth criminal of a receiver.
I think he's more of the dandy highwayman of the receivers. He doesn't play corner. Tick. That helps us with some certainty. Big receiver with a great catch radius. That stands out when you watch the highlight reels. Solid route runner. Excellent short area quickness as well. Quite shifty and evades contact quite nicely. And safe hands. Maybe lacks that top end speed though, which can hinder that separation off the release a little bit. It feels like a safe NFL pick, to be honest.
Very.
And a fancy pick that should give a return. Once again though, I think your best bet would be, I don't know, redraft this year, maybe wide receiver 20 to 24-ish you'd be happy with. Dynasty, I think probably a fringe wide receiver 1-2 you'd be happy with long-term from him.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, he's had some mega stats. The last 2 years at college, he's got over 1,300 yards receiving, over 15-yard average per reception. So he's a big worker. Look at the quality of last year's wide receivers. He's up there, maybe not with your Malik neighbours, but there's nothing that landing spot dependent that I think he's got the talent to be, a top 20 wide receiver next year, maybe even a top 15.
I think he could do with a solid pairing to help him grow in year one. I think he'd work quite well alongside a clear wide receiver one next season. Landing spots, few projections, but I think Cowboys, you can hear them a lot with connections to a wide receiver. Broncos, once again, you can hear Broncos a lot. Panthers as well, if they get tempted at pick 8, maybe a little bit high though. But as you say, when you've got him on a tier in his own when it comes to wide receivers, that's when teams tend to pull the trigger early, isn't it?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he went inside the top 10.
Right. Outside of McMillan, the following really could go off the board in the actual draft in any order, I think. And I think there could be cases made for all of these.
I've got 3 other potential first-round picks. Let's see if you... And I've not seen your notes. So you read out the 3 that you...
So, I'm not... And this order has changed a lot for me. Luther Burden III.
Yeah.
Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
Matthew Gold.
Yes, they're my next 3. Yeah.
Trey Harris, I like a lot, and we'll get to him.
Oh, he's not even on my list.
But I think he'll fall out of that. Luther Burden III, banger of a name, coming out of Missouri. I think he'll be a late day 1 pick. I think that's fair to say.
I think he'll be first round, yeah.
I think I wouldn't be shocked by day 2, but I think he's more likely to go late day 1.
He had quite low production in 2024, but that was more a product of like secondaries, like double tight coverage instead of really anything from his point of view.
The more I've looked at the wide receivers, the more down on Luther Burden I go, though.
Oh, okay.
So, start of looking at these, Luther Burden was in that mix of kind of where he is now, just below Ted McMillan. I was thinking where he'd land. And then through majority of me going through, looking at different bits of research, reading different things, he was at number 2. The last few days, I've got more question marks about that now. As you say, dominant 2023, but quiet 2024. That's got to be a question mark. Great tracking the ball, and his contact balance is excellent. That stocky build makes him so hard to tackle. Really elusive in the open field as well, but likely to be limited to the slot. Speed lacking to separate vertically on tape, but 4.41 seconds at the combine. I don't put too much into the combine 40 when what you've seen in the kind of highlight packages don't match that. Obviously, anyone can run fast when you're not wearing pads and being tackled. No, not everyone can. We could not. But when are you ever on the NFL field going to have just be in your pants and t-shirt, running with no one trying to tackle you? Not going to happen, is it? It just doesn't feel as refined as other players. But I do acknowledge maybe this is me being a little bit too low on him, as I have done before.
I think the issue with Burden is that I think he could potentially play at any position, wide receiver, slot, X-receiver, and he's maybe just doesn't look elite in any of those positions. But I think he's very well-rounded, and I think he'll appeal to teams for that reason.
I think if he is still on the board towards the end of the first round of the draft, there's a number of teams that could take him. I think if he did drop to day 2, Browns, Titans or Jags, I think would hugely benefit from him. But obviously we'd much rather see him at, Chiefs would be quite a nice landing spot for him, wouldn't it?
I'd be very surprised if he dropped to day 2. But, you never know, do you?
I just think we're going to have surprises when it comes to the draft this year, wide receiver. And we're either going to have a run that we think that was a lot more gone off the board, or we're going to have more making it to day 2 than we thought. Higher or lower, 4 wide receivers gone day 1.
I think that's the limit. I think that's the absolute most. So I'd go lower if I was going to go anywhere. I'd be surprised.
So we'll go 4.5 as our line.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Fancy outlook. Redraft, fringe wide receiver 2-3. Maybe could be his ceiling. I don't know. Dynasty, I think wide receiver 2 in the right spot. Would seem a fair return from him.
Yeah, I think we're being quite cautious with a lot of these pre-draft. After draft will be a much better idea in terms of how potentially they might do. Just look at the likes of Neighbours last year. Who else? Who was the guy who you were quite down on, who did well at the Jags?
Oh yeah, Brian Thomas Jr.
Brian Thomas Jr.
Well, this is where I sit with Luther Burden. Last year, I can remember lots of people were high on Brian Thomas Jr. I think I don't see it. What am I not seeing? And then they see, oh yeah, that was it. I was missing some quite obvious talent. Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't quite see it last year, and I was wrong. And maybe that's the same for Luther Burden this year. Emeka Egbuka, next up from Ohio State. I think he could possibly go above Burden in as kind of mid to late first, early second at the absolute latest. Breakout age 19.9, which is good. That height 6'1" and weight 205 is a perfect size for a wide receiver. He's my favourite wide receiver in the draft to be watching on tape as well. Feels like it's a safe floor, but a lower ceiling than most. I think he probably feels like a bit more of a safe pick for fantasy than some of the other options. If I was in a situation where I was taking a gamble on a wide receiver, I'm going Luther Burden. If I'm in a situation where I'd like a nice steady flex play to give me a championship run within the dynasty team, I'm probably going to go with Booker instead.
He's very polished. It looks like he will play as a slot receiver. He played 423 snaps in 2024, and 343 of those he lined up in the slot. So, that kind of highlights him as a specialist slot receiver. So, it depends if there is a need for that within a certain team.
Absolutely. And I think those reliable hands, great instincts, clever route runner would make him very efficient in that role in the right landing spot. Bit of running work too he's been involved in. So that's a little addition to his toolkit. Solid red zone threat. This is what I find the most interesting. 10 touchdowns from 74 receptions shows his dependency when it comes to being targeted for the touchdowns. Struggles a little with contested catches. Lacks a little explosiveness of the question marks there. I feel consistent wide receiver on his team and solid for fantasy as a wide receiver 2/flex option. I feel I'm being very positive about a player that isn't going to be a league winner on your team, but there aren't many out-and-out league winners, I think, in this crop, unless something comes through next season. But you can't neglect that part of depth on your team, can you?
No, and I expect Egbuka to have like you say, I think out of the receivers, he has got one of the most solid floors. I really do think that he will have a consistent first season wherever he ends up. He looks ready. I read some quote about there's a bit of draft fatigue around him because he's been mentioned as a prospect for a few years, but he's definitely NFL ready.
Landing spots, Broncos again. We'll mention those pretty much everywhere because they need wide receiver help. Cowboys, if he drops down there, unlikely there in round 2. I think he'll be gone before that point, and they're not going to take him high in the first round. Steelers, I think, is an interesting landing spot as well, potentially. I think he'd be a lovely complement alongside DK and alongside Pickens.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really complete wide receiver group if he were to land there.
Oh, yeah. I don't like the sound of that. I
don't
like the sound of them having a complete receiver room.
Next, a player I am really, really undecided on. I think I'm putting him wide receiver. I have put him wide receiver 4 here. I think if I'm true to myself and what I think, I would drop him down below Trey Harris, if I'm honest. But I've written him down as 4, so we'll stick with 4. And that matches what you've put down as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, he does look like a very, very talented player, does Matthew Golden.
He was underwhelming for most of 2024, though, but finished hot. Then ran very quick at the combine. So, great downfield from the release. Obviously quick, 4.29 seconds in the 40-yard dash. Can play outside in the slot. Is a solid route runner. Fantastic instincts. Routinely high points the ball as well. There is a lot to like. Some drops, not a huge amount, so not necessarily a massive concern. Maybe a little small to be dominant on the outside. Yes, is quick in the 40. Will that transition when you're being chased down by elite NFL corners? Possibly, possibly not. My question is, was he inconsistent or was he poorly used last year in Texas? 311 yards of his 987 came in 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they were big games in the playoffs, and if you can pull out in the big games, you can pull out any time, but he didn't. There were several games he was around 50 yards week in, week out, and that's where I have the question marks.
My worry with him is he looks like an excellent kick return option. So I worry that if he lands up at the right team, that they might kind of sideline him into that rather than as a consistent receiver. I think that would be wasting his talent a little bit, but quite often that's something that happens with rookies to kind of ease them in and get them used to the playbook. But he's very talented and great footwork, and like you said, I think you mentioned after the catchability. But yeah, there's a slight question mark over him, but I do think he will go tail end of day 1 in the draft.
Landing spots, Broncos and Cowboys again. I really like him at the Chargers, though. I think he'd be a fantastic fit with McConkey and Johnston. I think he would really elevate that offense there. Fancy outlook, if he steps up, redraft, receiver 2-3, I think is his ceiling for next year. Dynasty, I think he's got the potential to be a fringe wide receiver 1-2.
Yeah, high
I
end
also
2.
think he's got the potential to be a boom-bust flex play. I'm really, really not sure about Matthew Golden. I think he's the player I'm most undecided about when it comes to the crop this year. Next up then, I've got Trey Harris, who's my wide receiver 5. And as I said, I think I just like watching him more, so I'd probably pop him ahead of Matthew Golden. Career year in 2024. Interesting fact, he was Malik Neighbour's high school quarterback.
Really?
Yeah.
And he's turned into a receiver.
Would you like to, honestly, I think that's why I like him. So many interesting facts about Trey Harris. Would you like to know his actual name, Ed?
What was his first name? So his first name is not Trey, or he's not called Trey Harris. So is Harris his name?
Harris is his name.
So Trey is short for something.
Yeah, well, I think I know what it is. I've tried to search on it. I can't prove it, but I think I know what it's short for.
Tremendous.
Cleveland Joseph Harris III.
Wow.
I think Trey is for 3, for 3rd. He's Trey Harris.
Right.
Kind of like Trey Cool from Green Day. I think he's doing that sort of deal.
Okay. Right. Yeah. It's a solid name, that is.
He's the 3rd one, so he's Trey Harris. Anyway, that is no fancy relevance. As I said, their career year in 2024, best yards per route run in their class, 5.12 yards. Best yards per catch, 17.2. He's just brilliantly productive, excellent in contested catches, and fights off contact really well. He can be slow off the release. That will be a problem at NFL level. Not great at breaking tackles, but routinely finds space to avoid this anyway. Injuries over the last 2 seasons do give the need to have a little bit of a pause for thought. I think that's a question mark people will have. But I just love watching him. He was just so entertaining to watch. He's a close one as far as when I'm looking at my guys from the wide receiver crop. It's between him and Igbuka. I really enjoyed watching, and I will want to get some shares of them in my teams because I'm looking forward to watching them next year, wherever they land.
Do you think the Ravens will be in for a receiver in the first couple of rounds, or do you think no?
No, I think with Bateman stepping up last year, Flowers proving he's the real deal. Hopkins hit and miss. Tillon Wallace is still there. No, I think we will pick a wide receiver, but I think that'll probably be round 4 or 5 at the absolute earliest. Projected landing spots. So I've seen lots of mocks where he's ended up at the Chiefs, which would absolutely ruin him for me. And when we did the mock draft with Rich, the projected mock draft for landing spots has him at the Chiefs as well. I like him too much to end up there.
So you think he's going off the board towards the end of the first round?
I think he could do, but that might just be me being quite high on him that sees that. I just think there's a lot about him, and I think in the right scenario, he could be a really, really exciting player next year, and someone that I would hope to pick up in rookie drafts, maybe late first, I reckon.
Mm-hmm.
That's my top 5 then, including Travis Hunter. Anyone you would put in there that I have not included?
I mean, there's a couple of others who I enjoyed looking at. I liked, and the name I'm going to butcher now, Elik Iomana. Elik.
I'm going I think you're right the first time.
Yeah,
I think you may have laboured this.
I'm making it too cool. But anyway, he's strong. I like his size. I think he's got the talent to become a starter. I mean, he's one of these who's been described as having a good football IQ. But I think that basically means that he just does subtle things to create space. So I think he's got the potential to be quite exciting.
There's lots of hope that he's a solid route runner, but it's quite a limited route tree that he's been asked to run. So that'll be one of those question marks, won't it? Drops as well, I think, were a bit of an issue, weren't for him last year.
Jack Beck is another one who I looked at. Now, he's one who has battled injuries and missed games. So it's basically, is someone going to trust his high? I think he's got the potential to be an impact wide receiver too, but whether people are prepared to take that punt on him, I think is the issue.
He's one that seems that lacks speed and that elite separation as well. And I think, as we said before, a lot of the corners that wide receivers come up against at college are not NFL ready yet, or they'll be in the draft, and are also may well not even make it that far. So if you're not being able to do that corners at the college level, that would be a concern coming up, wouldn't it?
Anyone else who you're interested in?
So I would say the next few to throw into the mix are ones that I'm not necessarily massively high on, but are ones that you could change your mind on if they landed in a perfect situation or a training camp injury hits the wide receiver ahead of them. So Jalen Royals, really good route runner, lacks the ability to handle physicality through his routes though, so that's a bit of a question mark there. Jaden Higgins. I think we've heard a lot about Jaden Higgins. Great catch radius, solid route runner, recognises coverages quickly. 15 receiving touchdowns from 87 receptions is exciting.
Can I read you the quote from PFF about Jaden Higgins? Higgins is well built for an ex-receiver with some added wiggle and agility for a big man.
Oh, where'd you add the wiggle?
I love that he's got a bit of added wiggle in there, so yeah.
That's what I quite like. If I took my car in the garage, I've added a bit of wiggle for it.
It's going to go so much faster.
I've got Tez Johnson to mention as well. He's a really twitchy wide receiver, great ability to change direction. Very, very, very small though. 5'10", 155 pounds. I've had bigger dinners.
155 pounds. I think my left leg weighs that.
Also, this won't surprise you, quite a small catch radius for the little boy. There we go. It's been disrespectful about an elite athlete. Jalen Noel, another smaller player, 5'10", but 194 pounds. That's a dense individual.
That's bigger.
And obviously, explosive. You'd expect so with someone packing that much muscle. Concentration drops are a concern there. Isaiah Bond is somebody that I've heard mentioned a little bit. I think his great vertical speed for being a deep threat is what gets him those highlight plays. But when you look beyond the highlights, his production was just dismal really through college. So Isaiah Bond, I imagine he could be in the mix as a best ball pick somewhere late, maybe next year, but not someone I'm greatly excited in. Haven't missed anyone off your list though, Ed?
Last but not least from me is Xavier Restrepo, another great name. Another excellent slot receiver. But I think, when you look at Egbuka, I think that might harm Restrepo, because I think Egbuka is, the more kind of ready-to-go slot receiver. But Restrepo looks very talented. I think he's got quite a high floor, maybe wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 potential. And he has a really cool hometown. He comes from Coconut Creek in Florida.
Well, that sounds exciting.
Sounds like something of SpongeBob, doesn't it?
There's got to be some sort of large lizards and reptiles living there, haven't there?
Yeah. I'd quite like to visit Coconut Creek.
Well, that brings to an end our meander through the wide receiver crop. Any favourites you're looking forward to trying to draft, or are you waiting to see completely on landing spot?
Yeah, there are several. I think, Ted McMillan he's going to probably, depending on what happens with Travis Hunter, and I know we'll come on to running backs, there's some real talent there. Ted McMillan might go off the board a bit too early for me in rookie drafts. I do really like him. So I think it'll be the Bird and Egbuka Golden trio. One of those. I think, I do like Egbuka. So we'll wait and see where he ends up.
I think Matthew Golden will probably be a little bit too high for me because of that 40. We see it every year. Xavier Worthy, didn't he? And to be fair, Worthy's repaid some of that.
He's done okay, yeah.
But as soon as someone runs fast, people
they get overexcited, don't they? Yeah.
Well, we will be back next week with quarterbacks. But as I said at the top of the show, college experts, we ain't. We have to do a lot of research into this. So quick shout out to different people who we like to get our information from. Fancy Sanctuary, Rich over there has put out his rookie guide, which is absolutely excellent. And I think we say this every year. When I've kind of gone through and done my notes, I like to check the answers. Like Rich's guide.
Did I get it right?
It's a bit like the answer in the back of the book, isn't it? To go alongside that as well, Lewis Wood has put out an excellent rookie guide as well. So head over to Fancy Pancake on X to find him. And then also, I've really enjoyed watching some of the videos that Mags has put out as well, Dynasty Hot Seat over on YouTube. So if you've got a bit of a flavour for your rookie wide receivers now, at this point, do as we do. Go and then have a look at what some other people have got to say about them.
Find your favourites.
Find your favourite wide receiver. Find your favourite person to watch. After us, obviously, we know you love us dearly. We'll be back for quarterbacks next week, though, Ed. I think we're all done, aren't we, Ed, for now?
Yeah, I think all we need to say now is, Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestell and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.